Okay, so today I thought that I would try and build a shooting board. So I've never used one before, never built one before, so this will be kind of a interesting little project. I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos on different people's approach, and I picked one I think I kind of like, but we'll have to see. So what I've done is I've got a piece of MDF, some scrap 3/4 inch ply, and I think this might be alder, but I've got a piece of alder that I'm going to use for the fence. For right now, I'm just going to build a regular shooting board. I'm not going to build any of the attachments people build, you know, for the different angles and so on. I'll probably build those later. And I think I'm going to make the fence removable and adjustable so that as things get worn away, as you're using the plane on it, I can actually incrementally move the fence forward and even flip it around if I need to, and eventually just have, you know, replace it with a new one at some point. So anyway, so that's the plan. This first video in a while. We've been on lockdown. It's actually May, I don't know, 2nd, maybe it's the 3rd. I think it's the 2nd. But anyway, lose track of time, and of course, no haircuts. That's the other thing that's kind of going on right now. But anyway, so let me get set up and we'll start building this. Okay, so I've thought about this a little bit. I've got a scrap piece of 3/4 inch ply that I'm going to use for the catch that stops it against the bench, so you don't need to clamp it because you're going to be doing forward pressure on the shooting board. This is a factory edge, so it's nice and flat. I'm going to trim this edge off to make this square. So that'll be for the underneath side. I've been trying to figure out what I want to do on the top. This is the piece of alder I'm going to trim down to probably square, so whatever this is. Let's take a quick look here. That's a little bit under 1 3/4, so it'll be, you know, probably 1.5 by 1.5 once it's all said and done, and I joint it and make it nice and square. So that will be my fence. I think I'm going to use this Baltic ply for my top piece. So the way this works is basically you have a fence. It's going to be thinner, of course, and you have a place where your plane can ride against a square edge here, and then you put the stock that you want to plane down in here up against this fence. And I need to trim this board, and it's a little bit out of square, so everything has to be square. So you basically use the plane on its side and use this to plane away end grain is what it's really good for, is to do that. You can actually use it to plane and straighten things, but you'd need an auxiliary fence, I think, to keep it completely square. But for end grain, this would be, this is perfect. And of course, what one of the attachments people build is a 45 degree angle so that you can get perfect 45s every time. And then I also see people building an angle this way so you can get beveled joints, say for picture frames or what have you, by adding that attachment in here. So one of the things is I want to, once I trim this up, it's probably only going to be about this long, about 12 inches I think I'm going to make this fence. Yeah, that's 12 inches there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece of Baltic ply and put a piece in the back here, leave that 1.5 inch space for this piece, and I'll make it perfect once I've got this piece cut, and then push this piece on the front of that so I've got a perfect track for this. Then I want to cut some slots in here. and put some bolts through so I can actually mount the fence to this base, which is 3/4 inch ply, just a end cut piece from some shelves I've been building. And that way I can adjust it as time goes on, because as you use your plane, you're going to actually plane away part of your fence as you go, because it is flush to the piece that you're planing. And what this does is it gives you that support against the edge here, so that when you're planing the end grain of a piece of wood, it's got something behind it so it doesn't chip out. One of the problems you have when you try to plane end grain is the edge of the board will chip away, and that's obviously less than optimal. The one other way around that, of course, is you don't trim your board to size until after you plane the end grain, and then you trim it to size to get rid of any chip out you might have got. But the best is to build a shooting board, and it's pretty easy to build. So anyway, I'm going to square up these pieces and then start working on the build. Actually, I'm not sure how I'm going to mount this yet. I don't know if I have the hardware to do that. I'm going to have to search for the hardware. So I'm going to turn the camera off while I and reposition things so that I can start squaring this stuff up. So I'm going to use this to set my fence distance, so that when I cut this, hopefully it's nice and square. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy. All right, that looks pretty good to me. So there is my piece for the underside of the board that will keep it from, hold it in place while you're planing. So I just need to figure out, do I want to mount it this way, which I probably will. Yeah, that's plenty. That's plenty. It's 3/4 inch, so I can actually put mounting screws up through here and mount it directly to the bottom side of the board. I think I'm just going to leave it this width, whatever this is, 14.5. I'm just going to use that to cut this off. The other thing I'm going to do is check the square on these things. I'm out of wall space, so I haven't been able to mount my woodpecker tools on the wall, so I just keep them in the boxes for right now. Doesn't really matter. Yeah. Okay. That end is definitely not square. Neither is this end. It's not too bad. This end's actually not too bad. That end is completely out of square. I don't know what happened there. And I think I'm going to glue and screw. So, all right. So I'm just marking this as down, and that's where this is going to mount, and I think we're good. So now I need to trim that up slightly, and then I'm going to have to trim this up slightly. Actually, this one's fine. I will trim these two I'll trim this when I get closer. I'm not going to use the MDF. I'm just going to use ply for this. Okay, so I'm going to trim this other board up. Nice. Okay. All right, so all my pieces are true. I think I need to put my crosscut sled on now. The way this crosscut sled comes is, this is one piece of wood or material here, and when you mount it on your thing the first time, you actually cut this, so you've got a thin precision kerf, basically insert. I know it's not an insert, but basically it's just as wide as the blade that I typically have in here for cross cutting. So it makes a really good cross-cut. This fence is adjustable, so you can, and because it's aluminum, I believe, you can adjust it as needed. And so I check it every once in a while, make sure everything is square and still set up. And because it's metal, it seems to maintain its precision a little bit better than the crosscut sled I built. So I'm actually going to test this really quick. I'm going to run the blade up higher. Yeah, so I'm testing it against a tooth here. I usually like to test it against a tooth there. That's this tooth right here, and a tooth there. And it's probably about 1/100th, maybe a little bit more. It's very, very, very close. And for what I'm doing right now, it's perfect. I am going to move this stuff out of the way. On my last cut, I was hitting these boards here. Okay, so I need to cross cut this guy to 22 inches. The other thing nice about this sled is it comes with things like the stop, and it's very well built, as most Incra, all the Incra stuff I own. I swear by it. I actually have their router lift, and I've also ordered their fence system. So I went ahead and set this up to cut the approximately 3.5 inches off of the end of this. So this will be the part that goes up against the fence, and then this will be the backing on the back side of the fence. So I think I'm ready to do this. This is up against here. I went ahead and locked it down. Everything seems square. I'm going to turn on the dust collection. So let me get the tailpiece. This I need to mount to right here. So I do need to trim this, and I think I marked it already. I did. Let's cut this off. Good. Good. And then I am going to probably put, and I'm just eyeballing this, it doesn't matter. I'm probably going to put 3 or 4 screws in here, about 4. About, I don't know, 4 inches or so apart. So I'm going to actually glue this on here. I want to drill some holes in here. I'm using this Craig pocket hole setup for the built-in bookcases that I'm working on, that I'm at a standstill right now. So I am going to, so I've got 3/4 inch and 3/4 inch, so I've got 1.5 inches. Okay, so let me drill some pilot holes here. With some countersinks. And again, this doesn't really matter. This is just the underside that's going to keep it from sliding when it's in use. So this just gets mounted to there. This is the underside, and that's what keeps it up against the workbench. And as you can see, I just drilled some pilot holes. I'm probably going to I'm probably going to glue this as well. I don't know. Probably. Let me just at least put one down in here. There we go. Actually, they're 1.25 inches. I don't need much. I don't want any spill out, so I'm just going to put a little in here like that. I'm not even going to mess with it too much. I'll just do this. Kind of mush it around a little. I need to make this 10 inches. 10 inches. So I'm going to cut this off at 10 inches also. Of course, I've lost all my pencils at this point. Here's one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up to cut to 21 inches. And what I'm doing is I'm sighting down the line to the base of the sled here, which I know is cut basically to a 0 curve. Oops, if I have the right end. This is 20 7/8. Exactly 20 7/8. And this line is exactly 20 7/8. So that's where it's going to get cut. I think we're good there. So here we go. Pop that in here. Go ahead and clamp it down. It's up against the stop. It's up against the fence. It's clamped down. Dust collection. we have is these two pieces mount on here just like that. Actually, just like this. Okay. They get mounted there. This goes right there. Then this guy, I need to still run through my joiner. This guy goes right there. Perfect. Okay. So that's basically how it's going to look. The plane runs on its side on this piece, which is perfectly flat and smooth, which I will lacquer and then put some wax on. This I'm going to put some slots in so I can lock it down in place. I'm going to glue, and maybe glue and screw this board in place. It might be worth screwing it in place just to make sure that everything stays square. This angle right here, the fence to this edge is what's critical. So as long as, yeah, and that's like right on. There's no gap whatsoever there. It doesn't really matter if it's slightly off on the board on the base. What matters is that the fence to this piece is square, because this is what's going to guide the plane and this is what's going to hold the workpiece, and you want that to be perfect 90. And it is. So far so good. So I need to plane this up. I'm probably going to cut this end off because it looks like there's a crack forming here, and this other end looks a lot better. So I looked on a couple of videos, and so this is my pieces now. This board, and this are not yet mounted. I still have to cut slots here, have to mount this to the base. I think I'm going to glue it. That's what most people seem to do. But a lot of people are cutting very slight kind of dado or rabbet joint in the edge here. And I'll show you why. Let me grab the plane. So if you notice, the plane itself, the blade is about 1/4 inch up from the edge. And that's just because the plane body is basically that thickness. But so there's 1/4 inch there. So if I don't put a little lip in here, what's going to happen is this plane is going to start cutting into this wood. So basically what we're doing is we're pre-cutting it, and it's going to ride against the bottom 1/4 inch, and that way the blade itself won't get hampered by the base plate here. I'm getting ready. I've set this up to cut about 1/2 blade width rabbet on this, and I set the height up based on the measurements I did for the blade earlier, and I used the fence then to just move it over to where it's about 1/2 blade width. It's just a guesstimation, and it's just to account for where the cutting edge of the tool is actually going to be, so that I can move it over just a fraction. So we'll see. Worst case scenario, I will plane it off. Anyway, okay, so I just need a couple of push blocks here. And we'll just push this right on through. Turn on my vacuum. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's just a very small edge. So basically, this has got a little lip. It's very tiny. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. It probably could have been about a 32nd. The plane actually rides against this bottom piece here. And the blade clears that because the blade is up from the bottom. So it clears that lip, so that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. And then once I have this mounted, I will basically line it up with the top part here, but I'm going to, I might run this through the jointer. I'm trying to decide. All right. Wonder if I should make that on the back as well. I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. Because I'm just going to put this, yeah. All right. So now the next question is, there's one, and there's two. So I'm just going to put some glue on it. I don't think it needs to be a whole lot, but I do want it to maintain, so I just don't want a lot of squeeze out. That's perfect. Okay, I'm okay with that. Let me get some screws here. Perfecto. Okay. So basically, these screws are really just kind of holding it in place while it glues, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of holding, extra holding on here. All right, they're all countersunk, so when this is said and done, this isn't coming off of here anytime soon. These are 1-inch number 8 screws, and I'm using a number 8 countersink bit. All right, and I need one right there. Perfect. Okay, so I can clamp this as well, but I think that'll be, I don't think it'll be fine. So there we go. So I want to drill some holes in this so I can mount this fence with these bolts, some bolts I had on hand. The bolts will go through the base and up through the fence and then bolt down. But I want to cut some slots in the fence so that I can actually slide it forward as it wears because as you're planing, you will wear out the fence eventually. So I need to figure out how I'm going to cut these slots to make that work. I don't think they need to be very long, just in like 1.5 inches or so. However, I'm going to cut some recesses for the bolts, both in the bottom and in the top of the fence, so that the heads don't protrude. And so I'm going to use Forstner bits to cut those recesses, and then probably, like, I think it's a 3/8 or so bit to cut the hole for the bolt itself. So I just need to make sure where I mount this gives me that ability to slide it, and make sure that I put the holes in the front of the fence slot, and that way the fence can slide forward towards where the plane will ride. So I've kind of marked where I think those slots should be. To start out with, though, I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and drill the hole for the bolt as well as the recess with the Forstner bit, and mount the fence and just make sure that everything seems to line up and is square and everything's good. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that first, and then worry about cutting the slot as a part 2. So I set up my drill press with some stops so that I could get the 2 end starting positions for the slot that I want to cut. And again, I'm just going to mount with just 2 bolts for right now without the slot, just to make sure everything kind of is square and it works and so on. So I've got the drill bit in that matches the bolts that I'm using, and I think it's 3/8 is the drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes in the front end of those tracks. I'm going to go ahead and set up my depth stop here, just so I don't go too far when I'm drilling this. So here we go. I have the sound of the video actually turned down so you don't hear the background noise. This alder actually is pretty easy to work with. It's not rock hard, and it's not as soft as pine, so it actually does a fairly decent job of with tools, whether it be routering or drilling or sawing or planing. I actually used this. This is a piece of scrap from a headboard that I made using alder. So very little chip out, looks good. Everything's good to go. Now I need to put in a Forstner bit to build the recess so that the bolt will drop down and become flush. I'll also need to do the same thing on the base. Drill the hole and then use a Forstner bit to drill the recess. So let me go get that set up now. Well, since I left the fence and the stops in place from the drilling the first holes, that'll allow the Forstner bit to actually line up perfectly centered on the holes that are already drilled. Normally I would drill the Forstner holes first, because the Forstner bit itself has a point in the center, and that's a perfect spot to line up your next drill. But because I'm using the fence and the stops, this actually is not an issue in this particular case. So the only thing I need to do is I'm drilling a recess that's big enough to hold the washer as well as the nut, and I just need to make sure I drill it deep enough. So I will test that out with a bolt with a washer on it and see how that looks. Unfortunately, I did a lot of that off camera. There you go. These are locking nuts, so I won't be able to take it all the way down. It is actually not an issue if the nut protrudes a little bit from the top of the fence, because there's nothing riding on the top of the fence. I'm more concerned about the base. I need to make sure the head of the bolt is fully recessed with its washer in the base. But the base is 3/4 inch, so I think we got plenty of room to do that. So I think this this actually looks pretty good. So it's really just doing the base now and getting that set. Since I've got the fence drilled where I want the holes now, I think I'm going to use that as a guide to actually drill the holes in the base. And because the base is so much bigger, I decided to go ahead and use my hand drill to drill those holes. So I needed to check just to make sure everything was still square and good, and it was. And I took the drill bit out of the drill press and mounted it in my hand drill. So I'm just going to use this as a drilling guide, and the biggest challenge here is just keeping it hard up against the fence while I drill the hole through it. And then I realized I was going to drill through my bench here, so I put a little piece of scrap, or decided to put a little piece of scrap underneath my the base of my shooting board. After looking at it a little bit, I realized that it'd probably be better if I went ahead and mounted the back piece, or the backing piece for the fence, to hold the fence perfectly square while I drilled the holes to mount it. So I pulled the back piece tight up against the fence, and I'm drilling a couple of holes in the back piece so that I can use screws to attach it to the base. And sorry, my screwdriver is right in the middle of the video there. So same as the main body, I'm going to glue this down and then use some screws to hold it in place. I don't want any glue to go where the fence is, so I only need it on the back part there. But I had marked the location of the fence previously. So I'm just going to kind of move this around a little bit on the glue. I'm not really trying to make it a perfect glue surface because it is going to have screws in there. The important part is that it's pulled up tight against the fence, and it's flush on the front side there, so that when the plane moves past the fence, it has some support. And so I'm just going to run a couple of screws in here to kind of hold it in place. I'll probably put, I think I'll put 2 more screws, so it's got 4 to hold it, and make sure the fence still is tight but can move, and it does. Looks pretty good. The fence itself has got a slight difference in width, front to back, and I think so do those, so the boards that I use on the top. And I don't think it's much, it's like a 1/100th of an inch kind of thing, but it's just enough that you can tell a difference in friction in different locations. So a lot of that is just the way my table saw fence and everything is, set up right now. Even though I align it, it's not the sturdiest of fences, and it gets out of a line pretty easily. So now that I have the backing piece behind the fence secured, I can go ahead and start drilling the holes through the fence and through the base. After drilling the first one here, I decided it'd probably be a good idea to check for fit and use the bolt and the nut itself to hold the fence in place so that I can drill the second hole precisely so it doesn't get too far off. So I go ahead and take the bolt with a washer, stick it through the back, even though I haven't put the Forstner bit through there yet. And put a washer and a nut on it just so I can tighten it down here. So overall it looks pretty good, and now I just need to find a socket set to tighten it down. So it turned out I needed a 14mm socket to lock this bolt in place. So since I had one bolt in there and it was in fairly tight, it actually holds the fence really well. And I decided I wanted to test it. I've been building this for the last couple of hours and thought it'd be a good idea to take a piece of scrap and see how well, how true it cut the edge of the scrap with my plane. The primary use for a shooting board is to straighten up or plane end grain on wood, which is always difficult to do without having it chip out on you on the back side. So this fence actually provides good support for the back side, and the track that the plane rides in against the fence angle is exactly 90, so it gives you a perfectly square cut. And it's hard to see from the camera angle here, but it's actually a very nice 90-degree cut, and there's no light showing, and the fence is still aligned perfectly. So I think this is going to turn out to be a success here. And you know, it's taking off little bits of shavings, and you can incrementally, just very small amounts, move it forward and shave off what you need and get your joints perfect. So now I just need to finish this up and put some lacquer on it and put some wax on the tracks so that it stays good and smooth, and that the plane moves freely on it.